I didn't put so many second episodes of series together on purpose. Last week we had Voyagers, and this week we have the second episodes of 3 other Trek seasons here on Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Putting a new spin on personality-changing viruses at number 486. The Naked Time, 33 1/3. Or Dramatis Persona. The Trek writers basically dusted off the old Naked X plot and slapped a new coat of paint on it in the form of turning the crew against each other instead of showing what happens on ecstasy. A Klingon ship comes back from the Gamma Quadrant, and the last survivor of the doomed ship infects the station population with the virus. That makes them agitated and drives the senior staff into 2 factions, following either Kira or Cisco. Ben makes this awesome clock that you see in his office again randomly, for seemingly no reason. Odo's the only one unaffected and figures out a way to disrupt what's happening to them. We've got one of the few single-episode stories of Season 4 Enterprise at 485. Sex Sells, Part 3, or Bound. This one is weird and fun in a soap opera-y kind of way. Enterprise receives 3 lovely Orion females who are really there to spy because Archer has a price on his head by both the Klingons and Orions. Trip is the only male crew member immune to their charms because he banged T'Pol once. The most interesting thing about this one is getting to see one of the many actresses that portrayed Zial again in some green makeup and skimpier clothes. Getting frisky at 484, 7-Year Itch, or Blood Fever. Recurring character Vorik, brother of Torek, engages in workplace sexual harassment of B'Elanna. While undergoing the Vulcan Pon Farr, he somehow transfers his libido steroids to Torres, and then she gets a little saucy with Tom on an away mission. You think Vorik took his frustrations out on the holodeck, but he forces his way onto the planet, and we end up in this ridiculous ritual combat thing like a mock time. At the end, we get the reveal that the Borg have been here, and Voyager is creeping up on their primary tract of space. 483 is participating in a sham marriage. Playing Klingon. Or the House of Quark. When a drunk Klingon in Quark's bar falls on his own knife, Quark falls into some Klingon legal nonsense, which ends up with him being married and head of a Klingon house. He helps sort out a plot against the house, and in the end gets Grilka a special dispensation to be a woman in charge of a house. Okay, I'm really fine with all the times Trek has changed Klingon makeup, but the retconning of L'Rell as Chancellor 100 years before this, and now this woman, who would be the first woman to sit on the council, with the implied word ever? It's a fun watch that does give a woman a bit of power in the end, but ultimately just highlights the patriarchal BS of Klingon society. We get some awesome Gowron eyes in this one. This may be my favorite DS9 Gowron appearance. Back on the station, Keiko shuts down the school finally and goes on a 6-month expedition to Bajor. Cue Miles' bromance with Julian Bashir. Striving for the finish line at 482, Speed Racer. Or Drive. Oh hey, look, a pre-9/11 plot on terrorism. Remember these were a plot that almost costs B'Elanna and Tom, along with thousands of others, their lives, but you could still end on a cute gag of Tom and B'Elanna getting married and taking the still broken Delta Flyer on a honeymoon? You guys literally just rebuilt the Delta Flyer after Janeway destroyed the old one. And now Tom's got it involved in a race with some formerly warring species, and Voyager tries to bring stability back to the region. I really like the white and black racing flight suits, and Neelix seems to find his most useful purpose in the history of Voyager as the announcer of the race. Harry Kim ends up partnering with one of the aliens to get into the race after B'Elanna got him kicked off the race team so she could have some sweet time with Tom. Harry figures out he's in a race team with someone trying to sabotage the race, blow up everyone at the finish line when the Delta Flyer explodes. And he saves everyone. Action-packed, but we don't see the wedding since we'd already seen it in the alternate Voyager from Course Oblivion a season before. Doing courtroom trek at 481? Truth. Or a matter of perspective. We're dropped into the captain painting at a nude model painting class, which is pretty cool. Except for the music. There's more bad music cues later in the episode also. By the third season, these selections are inexcusable. The bulk of the runtime gives us a look at the trial format with multiple perspectives, and none of them are necessarily right or wrong. But what I really want to know is just how handsy Riker got with Mrs. Apgar. If all the versions are somewhere in between what really happened. Pretty much all courtroom trek is good. But overall, this episode is a severe underuse of incredible actor Mark Margulies, who's in a few of my top 50 favorite movies of all time. Bringing home a human corpse at 480, Stuck. Or One Small Step. This one's odd but satisfying when Voyager comes across a subspace garbage collector that in a turn of weird fate picked up a mission to Mars in the 21st century, killed the pilot, and Chakotay's obsession with it will strand the Delta Flyer. Seven learns to try and take in the narrative of the work Starfleet does, and not be purely analytical all the time, even though her criticisms of the commander that nearly stranded them in the Graviton Ellipse are totally valid. We don't find out what's on the 4th floor at number 479. Team building. Or learning curve. So many microplots to merely end the run of Voyager's short first season. There were supposed to be more episodes, but they were held over to season 2, and this became the happy-go-lucky way to head into the summer. Janeway messes around with her holonovel. Neelix's cooking is so bad the bioneural gel packs that regulate the ship's functions become infected with food poisoning. Meanwhile, the main plot involves Tuvok bringing some of the rougher around the edges Maquis crew up to speed. In the end, he learns as much about flexibility as his recruits learned about teamwork and responsibilities. A fun enough watch overall. Not cut out for space travel at 478. Hoshi is a slug. Or fight or flight. We establish the running gag of a squeak under Archer's deck plate and find out Hoshi is more comfortable on the starboard side of the ship. The writers find every reason for her to be a pain in the butt in this episode, including her finding the dead crew of a ship they check on. It seems she may not be cut out for space travel, even though she's the best translator Earth has to offer. In an analogy to her, she picked up a slug on another planet they visited, but it's getting sick. And by the end, they deposit it on a new planet so it might survive? Way to contaminate a biosphere to validate your growth as a character, Hoshi. Seeing the Black Mountain at 477. The Great Forest. Or Mortal Coil. Neelix dies for multiple hours, but the Doctor brings him back with Seven's nanoprobes in some kind of perpetual life scheme we won't revisit. He's dismayed that he didn't find the Talaxian afterlife, and starts questioning everything in his life, to the point he's ready to commit suicide by transporter. Samantha Wildman, who doesn't know how to read a room, or to her own daughter, thinks getting the suicidal guy to read to her kid is more important than Neelix's current situation of mental health. And what does the ending with Naomi in the Great Forest actually symbolize? That Neelix is all better? Trying to validate itself as an episode at 476. Once a terrorist. Or Past Prologue. It's only the second episode, and we open to just plain simple Garrick sizing up Bashir for a new suit, or something. In Ops, a Cardassian ship is seen chasing a Bajoran ship, which Cisco provides shelter to. Lursa and Bator come to show us their bubes, and trade with the now supposedly peaceful terrorist. He's trying to blow up the entrance to the wormhole so Starfleet will leave Bajor like the Cardassians, and Bajor can go back to a xenophobic caste system. You know, the good old days. This episode definitely suffers from characters not quite being dialed in yet, but a decent watch just the same. Closing out our block at 475.
Resident Evil Trek 2.
Or Context is for Kings. Another Discovery episode with potential and a pile of action that missed the mark in spots and needed some time to round out the show's rough edges. I feel like this should have been the first episode of Discovery, and then put the two-part pilot to be a conversation between Burnham and Lorca filling in the backstory. If this show had started like every Elder Scrolls game with our protagonist in prison irons and a backstory to fill it in, I think it may have been more interesting. So after starting with Michael on a prison shuttle 6 months after the Battle of the Binary Stars, Discovery saves the shuttle from a space storm with bugs. The prisoners try to kill Burnham during a fight at lunch, and Lorca recruits her to work for Starfleet with no rank. He then proceeds to throw her to the wolves on an away mission, finding out what happened to disable their sister ship. They find a large tardigrade with some very swollen nipples rampaging and killing Klingon boarding party. If Discovery was in the area to save this prison shuttle, why didn't they respond when the pilot asked her control for help with the bugs eating the hull? And did she ever get rescued? Things I think about. Much like the scowl on the security chief's face is very similar to when Archer does it. We get a very early setup that Section 31 is on the ship via a throwaway line of dialogue about someone wearing a black badge. But we won't talk about that till Season 2. Let me be clear. Tilly has been my favorite character on Discovery till she was relegated to babysitting duty in Season 4, but pretty much every scene she's in our introduction to her, I want to strangle her. Stamets acts like a clown, and his character needs to be fine-tuned. Plenty of action, but the pacing is off, and the show needs some tweaking.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Majel. Thanks, Majel.
Emission is not consistent with any known radiation.
Thanks, Majel.
Auto-engage time sequence synchronized. There has been a disruption of power to energy grid Beta 4.
Thanks, Majel.
Analysis in progress.
Thanks, Majel.
Warp core breach in 30 seconds.
Thanks, Majel.